Hi, welcome to Reinventing Local SEO. I'm John T. Bowles. I'm the CEO and founder of White Hat Ops Marketing, and we've been invited by Content Strategy Collective Live to talk a little bit today about things that are impacting local SEO. Looking forward to all of the great sessions today. We've been in SEO, or I've been in SEO for over 15 years. So some of our experience, and we'll be talking about the things we've seen changing and how we've reinvented ourselves and our agency to address the best needs of our clients and how we stay current with all of the changes. So today we'll talk about why reinventing. Speak a little bit about how mobile first has impacted local search, how structured data plays into that, and some of the competitive research you can do to develop your content plan for local SEO. Let's get started. All right. So I talk a lot about reinventing versus innovation. This is a concept, if you're interested, you can find out a little bit more about from chiefreinventionofficer.com. True innovation is out of the reach of most. So a lot of people talk about innovating. Well, we'll just innovate. We can make something new, but that's really out of scope sometimes by budget or ability. But if we're able to just improve one thing or improve on a core competency, that's much more approachable. And we found that to be something that we could align with how search changes over time. So if we keep improving one thing day by day, and as the algorithms and search strategies change, then we can keep up and or stay ahead of that with our reinvention. So let's get started and talk a little bit about what that means in local SEO. So location-specific intent, when you look at it, is pretty stable, but in the scheme of things, still fairly new to search. When we typically put in a search query, something very simple, maybe we want to learn to rock climb. Then you can see in the example here that we get some snippets at the top. We get people also ask. And then finally, we get search results or organic search results below that. We didn't get any ads this time, but there's a lot of things that can get in the way before we get down to organic search results. But if we change that with an intent, so instead of learn to rock climb, we can make a simple query of learn to rock climb near me. We haven't even added a true location as a city or a state yet, but we just changed our intent. So now Google search crawlers understand that I'm wanting to do something near me. Well, now we have a local map pack. I'm sure you're all familiar with a local map pack. There's a Google map at the top. There's 3 listings that are kind of the local 3-pack. And then we move into the people also ask below that. And then further down a page might be our organic search listings. But that simple query changed the intent. So we'll talk a little bit about intent today and how that really affects our local search strategy. Part of our local search strategy really is addressing mobile, right? So mobile first. Everything is now being indexed and or ranked by mobile first indexing. This was something that rolled out over several years, but is now fully rolled out. You can still have your desktop search results and desk indexing, but when Google is actually indexing and ranking your sites now, it is fully transferred over to mobile first. This is important because we know that when people get ready to buy or go or visit or do something, easily over 50% of their local searches are on a mobile device. We're starting to be even maybe a voice-enabled or smart assistant. But that number has plateaued a little bit from what we understand with this past year, but it's still for local searches or leading into a business or a place or a purchase that mobile devices are the highest percentage of where those searches are occurring. So mobile first did impact our local search, right? So many of us had with our devices now, the way that those search results are impacted includes proximity, right? So even though you may be trying to rank in a certain place or for local search, it's very dependent upon the device that someone's on, where their actual proximity is to you or not, and the relevance of that query. So let's talk a little bit more about how that plays into overall strategy. Some of you are familiar with a lot of tools maybe for measuring and helping support your local SEO strategy. WhiteSpark is one such tool. Darren Shaw does a survey as part of that business and organization every year, where he reaches out to local professionals, SEO professionals that have some authority in the local SEO space. And they ask them to fill out a survey based on ranking factors. There's a ton of questions in it, and he gets back some great data. So we'll use that data here to talk a little bit about the local pack finder. So these are not official Google results, but these are survey results based on a survey of people that are experienced with clients that they've worked on their accounts for a significant amount of time. So what we can see here is that this talks about the local pack or the finder, right? So again, those were those with a local intent, what's showing up and what's impacting getting into the local pack. We see that the largest signal from that group is Google My Business, or GMB. Google My Business truly is a very high establishing factor for that online visibility. But it's whether you can show up in that local pack is based on your proximity, relevance, and prominence. We also see things like reviews, on-page SEO, links, all of those things start to contribute where you might be placed in a local pack finder. So if you were really looking at this, then you might be thinking, well, really, I just need to spend my time, and the majority of my time, on optimizing my Google My Business listing. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. We often say in SEO that it doesn't get any, there is no easy button. We just keep adding things on. So you still have to kind of take care of your Google My Business listing. But and even though Google My Business continues to roll out new features, kind of quite actively this last year, especially in the pandemic and post-pandemic time, but there's still a little lack of control of what you're actually able to do there. Yes, you can fill out your description, you can choose your categories, you do have a small amount of control over your service area, but that's only really on what you input. It depends on someone's proximity to how that actually plays out for you. And then reviews are critical, but you're limited in control there, and citations and some other things. So we're not going to focus today on Google My Business, but we do want to say that it is part of the local pack, and you do want to make sure that you are completely filling it out consistently. So let's take a look at the next part of this survey, again by WhiteSpark. When they asked those same local SEO professionals what they felt was the most impact in their local organic search results and their rankings there, then on-page, or 32% of those people said that on-page was the highest impact of their local SEO efforts for organic rankings. So their website is the one thing that you also have the largest control over. So it makes sense then to spend a significant amount of time with on-page optimization for local SEO. Yes, Google My Business features are expanding, but they're still limited. Links are also part of this, and you can see behavioral citations, but then that Google My Business in this case actually dropped all the way down to 7%. So I think we're going to look a little bit more at on-page. So what does that mean? To improve your rankings in the local pack, in this case, if you want to improve your rankings here, then we want to make sure that we're sending all the right signals. You're filling out your Google My Business listings, and it's syncing with the knowledge graph, and so that you can improve your rankings here. And what we often see is that the people in this cases, this very example, somebody that was in the highest local pack will also be very present, if not top, in the organic search results. In addition to all of that, we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention that you also need to make sure that you're working with your citations and other reviews. So citations are built in to bring in a little bit more of context to your business, organization, or local SEO. So we do want to mention, just to make sure, I think everybody's pretty aware by now, that NAP, or name, address, and phone, must be consistent. Now, this was much more important in the past, but again, as we're starting to develop entities and structured data, Google's actually, don't get hung up on things like, is drive spelt out or drive abbreviated. Google's starting to understand those things, but you do want to make sure that your name and your information about your business is consistent. So name, address, phone number. There have been some changes this past year. Maybe there was personnel changes, maybe there was location changes. So keep all of those consistent, and it's a good time to go through and audit all of your different citations out there, besides just maybe your Google My Business listing or your Bing listing, okay? So if we think about those citations, they're a little bit about improving EAT. So we're starting to hear a lot of talk about local SEO and EAT. How does EAT, or expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, which is what the Google Grader guidelines suggest are part of our ranking factors, that if citations can improve EAT, or if other sources corroborate those details, then it's improving your expertise or your trustworthiness and your authority in some cases. So, for example, if Yelp and Angie's List and several other citations all say that this is the name of your company, this is the certification that you have good reviews and listings, then it helps corroborate those details. And why should Google disagree at that point, right? So one of the ways we can help with all of those signals is by Schema Markup. Schema Markup is something you have control over on your own website. It's getting easier and easier to implement. It used to be something that maybe you had to reach out to a developer with. Now we're finding that you can implement Schema Markup through plugins. If you do have a developer, it's a great way to kind of continue to test that and build it in at a much more robust scale. So things that we can add more info about through Schema include your local business, your organization, person or persons that are there, authors, events, and there's quite a bit more, but all of these have in some way a impact on your local business and the information and context about your business. One of the ways that we're starting to realize that is through entities. Entities is just another layer, a little more detailed around Schema Markup. Schema Markup is marking up types or properties, but an entity is defined as a well-defined thing or concept. It's singular, it's unique. An entity is something that Google is starting to develop now with machine learning. It talks about entities as a person, and a location is an entity. An organization can be an entity, an event or a thing. All of these can be entities. But Google, when they talk about this, really means topics. So we'll see a little bit over that. You won't always see entity mentioned, but when you see topics that Google is bringing to light, like search topics in Google Trends, they're really mentioning entities. And we'll get into that. So how do entities and structured data fit together? So structured data is really an entity-driven model. It's a way to organize the data regardless of language or device. That's important because as an entity is no longer driven by being in a certain language or coming from a certain device. Structured data in the past was, if we think about it, is textual data, right? So image files or videos or audios, those are all the things that can be structured or organized. And then these were layered in and delivered either through XML or JSON data, or maybe even sensor data from a location. And all of that gets put into the metadata of your on page or HTML. And then that is crawlable so that Google can start to distinguish that structured data and build it into its entity model. These entity relationships, as I mentioned before, are language agnostic. So meaning that as Google is trying to organize all the world's information and is able to translate that data, we have to be sure and give it as much contextual signals as possible, right? So with local schema, some of the things that your local organization needs to include are your address. Pretty simple, right? Area served. So area served can be your brick and mortar business, or if you're providing services and to your clients and maybe delivering to them, maybe if you're a plumber or attic insulation. Your brand, this is your name. Simple things like founding date, giving you a little bit more history, a little bit more authority, right? Opening hours, very important in this time where not only are we seeing searches in local search for near me, but now we're seeing an added element of open near me. People want to know if something is still open. If there was received awards or certifications or licenses, then those are things that, again, help kind of establish the EAT of that local SEO, or if you're a member of certain organizations. So why is this important? So if they develop enough entity information and entity ranking starts to rank what is the best of, then we won't require links in the same way. I know it might be a little scary to say that links may not be as heavily weighted as they were in the past, but as the information starts to kind of continue to be developed and indexed, entities and how it relates one entity to another and sets that context, then, and citations in their own way, links will happen in a little bit different paradigm or authority shift. So what does that mean? Multiple entities can be referenced on the same page. You can have linking entities that create this context, sorry. For an example, one of the things we're starting to see with those entities is that they need that context of same as. So in addition to just listing things like your address, name, brand, founding date, we also want to be able and give the search crawlers the information they need and same as. So this is a markup that is now being included, and specifically if you have for that entity a Wikipedia entry or a Wikidata data, Crunchbase, Facebook, all of these things that have a authority and can be referenced to where is the same as that listing, then it starts to put that context around your page and your local listings, right? So look at same as and start learning a little bit more about entity and think about that as the topics of your site and the topics of your business and search. We want to completely cover those topics and set those entities as categories, set those things that really tell us all the information that really anchors what your business is about, where the locations are. And if you do this, then you're going to start to be just those many steps ahead of your competitors. So let's talk about competitive research a little bit. So those competitive topic clusters, right? So what are the topic clusters that make you locally relevant? If you want to rank for something, then you probably need, in the past, very clearly a page or a post on your site about that topic. That hasn't really gone away. What we do understand is that we've kind of, in many ways, we've overdone that in the past. But if we still want to be the best Texas insulation company in Katy, Texas, which is just outside of Houston, then it's probably okay to have several different pages if you'll notice that their location pages don't actually mention Houston. but they are focusing on some of those surrounding areas. By default, also, their address, they are in Houston, but they're reaching out and kind of developing these very contextual pages, and they're being smart about it, right? In this particular case, they're actually writing content specific to each of those location pages. So that's still something that you have to consider is, are you writing a service page, and how does it relate or to your location? So if we search for services, we want to dive into variations. Now, this can be for you, or this can be part of that competitive research, right? What services are you providing that you know you're providing? But we use this often to look at what are their competitors looking at, what are the services they are offering, and is that something that we should be offering with our clients, or is it something that we can encourage them that maybe this is the next expansion that they want to build on as a new service offering or product offering? So you can look at not just a topic, but then you can look on the variations within that, and you can start to see things there that's going to give you all the things that you can answer or what your competitors are answering about a topic. In this case, if it was attic insulation, we also want to make sure we're covering attic insulation cost, and as maybe the cost in one part of the country or area different from another. So how is there seasonal changes around that cost? Is there attic insulation depth? Is there something, again, seasonally or local that makes it different from, describes why it would be important in the Houston or Katy, Texas area? And then some other things like R value, or is cellulose a better material? So maybe if our client offers cellulose, but they don't have any information about that on their site, we need to make sure, because that is a differentiator for them. So competitive research around what your competitors are writing about, what they're including, and then how that can inform also your local SEO strategy. All of this will help to build out a content strategy plan so that we can see not just in the local pack, but in the information right below that, and people also ask, is how can we answer those questions? So maybe if someone didn't find what they wanted right in the local pack, but they can start to kind of drill down and figure out what other questions. This is a little bit part of that journey of the process, right? So we'll look at related content, instant answers. People also asked, even as far as local news, to see if something is relevant and might be a post or part of that content strategy to, again, send signals about local intent. So one of the ways we also kind of do a little competitive research is we also want to monitor. We're going to switch back now to Google My Business. Just wanted to share this resource also because we find it helpful. This is on Sterling Sky, another good agency that does a lot of research and pushing out content around local SEO. They also track category changes by month for Google My Business. So you want to keep current and use this to establish expertise. If you're looking at those categories in Google My Business categories, you're always going to choose a primary category. But then you can list up to 20 categories and subcategories in there. So you want to look at those categories, keep them current, but also realize this is areas for content on your site. As also, you want to look at your competitor research. What are your competitors using as their primary category? And then make sure then if this is something that you want to compete directly on, if you're in the same service area or product area, then use this to stay current on categories and then what your competitors are using for their categories and how it informs your content strategy. Finally, if we want to look at truly a local SEO strategy, right, we kind of have to have location pages. For some of you, it will be a simple contact us page with all of your information about your business and on that one simple page. And then also consistently, maybe in your footer or from your homepage, you're going to have information again about your name, address, phone number, how to get in touch with you. But your location pages and your location plan is really going to be primary, separated from your services in some cases. pages by location plan, probably our first thing is to go slow. Don't overpublish. Build one and get it right. If you're rebuilding a strategy or reinventing a strategy right now, take your main page, whether it's your contact us, and just rebuild it and go through all the steps. Know the area that you're targeting and build it into that context, right? And then we'll look at don't skip steps. So good old SEO is not that different from the niche of local SEO. You still have to do all the things on the pages. You have to get the right title tag. You have to get the right H1s. You have to get subheadings. You have to address the content and develop a full strategy around it. But for your location plan, there's some other things that you want to do right. So in this case, this is REI's example of a location page for Williston, Vermont. And you can see Williston's right in the title tag. They also tell you what's available there, in-store shopping and curbside pickup. It's clear what the store hours are, how to get in touch with them for the phone, address, or get directions. And we can see a little bit more information. If you scroll down the page, we just saw in the previous slide, you could see events that were happening there. And then further down the page, you can see actually very local information about Williston. So you want to don't skip steps, know the area, give all the user-based info that they need. And then once you get this one page built out and you have it really well built out, then you may want to go back in and now we can start looking at how many times do we want to do this for other pages, right? How many other pages and other locations? It's pretty simple. If you have multiple locations, then you'll want to build one out for each location. If you're trying to target multiple locations out of smaller single stores or covering larger areas, then you want to be much more cautious about how many pages you build out. We don't want to get into the habit of, old strategies of building out a page for every targeted area. Really build one out for each location that you have and your service area around that location. When you're building out that page, we want to go back and make sure that we're wrapping it in the right schema, right? So on this REI Williston page, we can see that it has the local business schema built right in. And if you went a little further, they could start adding in entities for context. Lastly, we'll talk about how we can measure some of these things for success. So Google Insights is rolling out new areas where we can see Google Insights, how people discovered you, both in search and mobile and maps. So these will start to kind of be rolling out both since January, starting to see them a little more robustly in some of our clients' dashboards now, but that will be the thing that we're starting to focus on. We'll also see that there are a lot of things that don't show up in the tools that we can normally measure. So you're going to have to manually build in or work with some tools to find things that how you're showing up in featured snippets or people also ask. And then one of the things you can do if you haven't is make sure that you're adding good UTM tracking to all of those things that you do own. So there's a great resource by Claire Carlisle where she talks about how she uses UTM tracking for all of her Google My Business listings and posts and different sections in there. And lastly, I want to say that what we're researching now is a little bit around speakable schema. So we talked a little bit about mobile, how it impacts local SEO, and that people are speaking into their mobile devices or their smart assistants. Not everybody is eligible for speakable schema at this point. It's really for publishers, but it's just something that we're really looking at as, again, we're reinventing local SEO. So putting it all together, we're going to reinvent, look at structured data and how it impacts local SEO, and develop competitive content by our local intent as well. We've added some resources for you here, and we'll be able to say thank you for letting us spend a little bit of time with you with local SEO. If you have any questions, please reach out, jonty@whitehatOps.com, and we look forward to you winning with your strategies of local SEO. Thank you.